Hi everyone, tonight we're going to dive deep into something that's been lurking in the shadows of global politics for decades. Nuclear weapons. Picture this, just one push of a button and entire cities vanish. The air burns with radioactive fallout and the world teeters on the edge of annihilation. Nuclear weapons are not just a threat, they are the final cards in a deadly game of global politics. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. I'll be diving into weapons that could, in seconds, erase cities, change ecosystems, and make the planet uninhabitable. Some might call it science fiction, but trust me, these things are real. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. For as long as nuclear weapons have existed, they've cast a shadow over world peace. Nations that possess these weapons hold a terrifying power, one that could wipe out entire countries in a matter of seconds. But even more frightening is that this isn't just a hypothetical scenario. The U.S. alone has a stockpile of some of the most powerful bombs ever created. Some of these bombs, just sitting in silos and on bombers, could render civilization as we know it into a smoldering wasteland. And despite the world's efforts to regulate or reduce nuclear arsenals, the potential for their use, whether intentional or through miscalculation, remains one of the most horrifying prospects we face today. You've probably heard of the bigger names in nuclear weapons, like the atomic bomb, which ended World War II. But since then, these bombs have evolved into far more potent devices, capable of devastating not just cities, but entières nations. And believe it or not, the worst of them are still sitting in the hands of the world's superpowers, waiting for the moment when they might decide that it's time to use them. But what makes them so powerful? Is it the sheer destructive force they possess? Or is it something more, a political game, a psychological weapon that keeps nations in check through fear? With each passing year, these weapons become more precise, more deadly. But of course, they also carry a terrifying burden of responsibility. The B-61 Mod 12 might seem like just another piece of the nuclear arsenal puzzle, but let me tell you, it's far more complex and deadly than it appears. You see, not all nuclear weapons are created equal. Some are meant to wipe out entire countries, while others are designed for more targeted destruction. Enter the B-61 Mod 12, a bomb that combines precision with terrifying potential. The B-61 Mod 12 is often classified as a tactical nuclear weapon. Unlike the massive strategic bombs that could level entire cities, the B-61 Mod 12 was built for one thing: precision. But let me assure you, just because it's tactical doesn't mean it's any less destructive. At maximum yield, this bomb can obliterate a city with one flash of light. It's a modular weapon, meaning it can be adjusted depending on the target. The yield ranges from just 3 kilotons, all the way up to 50 kilotons. To put that in perspective, the Hiroshima bomb was about 15 kilotons. So, even at its lowest setting, the B-61 Mod 12 is enough to destroy any fortified military base or command center. But here's the kicker: it's also incredibly versatile. This weapon can be delivered by bombers like the B-52 Stratofortress or the stealthy B-2 Spirit. Hell, it can even be dropped by fighter jets like the F-35 Lightning II. And if that wasn't bad enough, the bomb uses GPS guidance to zero in on targets with extreme accuracy, even from high altitudes or supersonic speeds. So, imagine a bomber flying at 30,000 feet, releasing this bomb, and then watching it hit its target within mere meters of its intended location. The precision is chilling. But what really makes the B-61 Mod 12 unsettling is its political nature. Because it's tactical and adjustable, it could be used in a regional conflict without necessarily triggering a full-scale nuclear war. But don't be fooled. Its activation would still cross a line, and once that line is crossed, there's no turning back. The bomb's very existence makes one thing clear: the world is just one button press away from spiraling into uncontrollable chaos. Now, imagine the consequences of deploying such a weapon. This isn't just about killing military targets. It's about signaling to the world that a nation is willing to destroy everything in its path for the sake of power. The moment a bomb like this is deployed, the entire world watches, knowing that the next escalation could be the end. And as terrifying as the B-61 Mod 12 is, it's only one of many devastating weapons in the U.S. arsenal. Now, we move on to something that sounds like it belongs in a war movie: the MOAB, officially known as the GBU-43B Massive Ordnance Air Blast, but commonly called the mother of all bombs. This beast of a weapon is the largest non-nuclear bomb in the world. The MOAB isn't a nuclear weapon, but don't be fooled. It can cause just as much chaos and destruction as some of its nuclear counterparts. Picture this: a bomb that weighs nearly 10 tons and is over 9 meters long. It's massive, designed for maximum destruction, and has a single purpose: to obliterate anything in its path. The Moab is built to destroy everything from hardened military bunkers to underground tunnels, to the very morale of an enemy. The force of its blast is so powerful that it can crush buildings, annihilat entier village, and leave a crater large enough to swallow a multi-story building. In fact, the explosion can be seen from miles away. That's how big and terrifying this bomb really is. What's interesting about the Moab is that it doesn't need to be nuclear to achieve that level of devastation. The sheer energy packed into its conventional explosives is enough to cause widespread destruction. Its detonation produces a blast wave so intense that it can flatten everything in its radius, including heavily reinforced concrete. When it was used in Afghanistan, the explosion was so large that it could be seen from kilometers away. The bombing left a massive crater, a literal hole in the earth. But beyond its raw physical destruction, the Moab is also a psychological weapon. In a military conflict, just the sight of it being loaded onto a bomber is enough to send a message: there is no hiding from this kind of firepower. And when it's unleashed, there's no chance of retaliation. Its primary mission in Afghanistan was to obliterate an ISIS tunnel complex, but its real impact was far greater. The shockwave from the blast caused an intense psychological blow to both the enemy and anyone watching. It said, "We have the power to level you. There's nowhere you can hide." Despite not having a nuclear charge, the Moab is terrifying because of its psychological and physical power. It makes you realize just how destructive conventional weapons can be when built to such an extreme. The psychological warfare it embodies is just as deadly as its actual physical force. And let's face it, it's a weapon that doesn't leave much to chance. It gets the job done, and it does it loudly. And if a bomb like this doesn't send chills down your spine, wait until you hear about the next one, which takes precision to a whole new level without making a sound. Let's take a moment to talk about something that makes the idea of a sudden, unstoppable strike seem all too real. The AGM-86 Air-Launched Cruise Missile, or ALCM. It doesn't roar across the sky like the MOAB, and it doesn't cause a massive explosion upon impact. Instead, it's the silent, invisible hand of nuclear destruction, capable of erasing a city or a military target before anyone even knows what's happening. It's stealthy, precise, and deadly. Imagine a missile that can travel over 2.7 kilometers, skimming the ground, hiding beneath radar detection, and arriving at its target without warning. That's the AGM-86 ALCM, for you, a ghost missile. Launched from a B-52 Stratofortress, this weapon glides through the sky, flying under the radar and hugging the terrain to remain unseen. It uses a combination of inertial navigation and GPS guidance to ensure it reaches its target with deadly precision. When it's unleashed, there's no telling it's coming, and once it hits its mark, it's devastating. Now, what makes this missile even scarier is its payload. The AGM-86 ALCM can carry a W-80 nuclear warhead, capable of producing up to 150 kilotons of explosive force. That's enough to obliterate a city, leaving behind nothing but radioactive ruins and a toxic cloud that would linger for weeks, maybe months. A single missile, launched from thousands of miles away, could decimate a city like New York, making it an unstoppable force. But the real terror of the AGM-86 lies in its near invisibility. Unlike the big, loud weapons we've talked about, it doesn't give any dramatic warning. It's the kind of weapon that can strike before anyone even has a chance to react. By the time it's detected, it's already too late. Its stealthy nature means it can attack a target without the enemy having time to mount any kind of defense. And because it can be launched from high altitudes, the missile can take an unpredictable flight path, further complicating any attempt to intercept it. Think about it. This isn't just a weapon, it's a game changer. Imagine a single bomber, hundreds of miles from enemy territory, launching a barrage of these missiles, each one potentially carrying a nuclear payload that could wipe out a major city. There's no warning, no time to prepare, just a devastating strike, and the world changes in an instant. The AGM-86 is the perfect silent assassin, capable of delivering its deadly payload without ever being seen. And as terrifying as this stealth weapon is, it's just a part of a much larger arsenal. We're only scratching the surface here. But what happens when you take the stealth and power of a weapon like this and apply it to something even bigger? Stay tuned, what's coming next is about to shift the scales of destruction even further. Now, let's dive into something that doesn't just sit on land or in the sky. It's hidden deep beneath the ocean, out of sight and out of reach. The W-88 warhead, carried by the Trident II-D5 ballistic missile, represents one of the most powerful and stealthy weapons in the U.S. nuclear arsenal. It's a silent force, a weapon that can strike anywhere in the world without warning and leave total destruction in its wake. Imagine this: a U.S. nuclear submarine traveling unnoticed beneath the waves, armed with up to 24 Trident II missiles, each capable of carrying multiple W-88 warheads. These warheads have a yield of 475 kilotons, each more than 30 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. One missile carrying multiple warheads can decimate entire cities, reducing them to rubble in seconds. And because these submarines operate deep below the surface, they're virtually undetectable. Once they're deployed, there's no telling where they might strike. The Trident II-D5 missile has an incredible range, traveling over 7,000 miles, making interception nearly impossible. When fired, it re-enters the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds, leaving no time for the enemy to react. It's fast, it's stealthy, and it's powerful. The W-88 warhead itself has the capacity to obliterate multiple targets simultaneously, all with the precision and speed of a missile that's been designed for one thing: total devastation. But the real power of the W-88 lies in its stealth. A submarine carrying this weapon can sit silently beneath the ocean for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. The idea of launching a devastating nuclear attack without the enemy even knowing where the threat is coming from is both terrifying and brilliant. The Trident II-D5 gives the U.S. the ability to retaliate from a hidden position anywhere on the globe, ensuring that any nuclear conflict could lead to mutually assured destruction. The idea of launching an attack from the deep sea has a chilling effect because it gives the U.S. the ultimate deterrent. It doesn't matter where you are on the globe or what you think you're protected by. If one of these missiles is launched, it can reach you. There's no way to stop it in time. And once it strikes, everything is gone. This weapon epitomizes the concept of assured destruction, ensuring that no enemy can ever escape the possibility of annihilation. And when you think about it, the submarine-based launch system of the W-88 brings an unsettling truth to the surface. It doesn't need to announce its presence. It could be anywhere, waiting. It could strike tomorrow, or in years to come, but when it does, the destruction will be absolute. The W-88 ensures that any enemy would think twice before even considering an attack on the United States. As we move deeper into the arsenal of destruction, let's talk about the B-83. A bomb so powerful that it could make the very ground shake and burn with a force beyond comprehension. If the W-88 is the silent strike from the depths, then the B-83 is the roaring beast of the U.S. nuclear inventory, capable of wiping entire cities off the map with its sheer power. The B-83 is a gravity bomb, a weapon that was designed during the 1982nd and is still in active service today. This beast can reach a maximum yield of 1,200 kilotons, which is more than 80 times the destructive power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. A single detonation could erase an entire metropolis, imagine New York, Los Angeles, or even entire regions reduced to radioactive dust in an instant. The sheer scale of destruction the B-83 can cause is so vast that it's almost incomprehensible. This isn't just a bomb. It's a weapon that could end civilization as we know it, wiping entire populations from the face of the Earth. The B-83 can be carried by strategic bombers like the B-52 Stratofortress or the B-2 Spirit, making it highly versatile. It can be dropped as a free-fall bomb or guided to its target, depending on the mission. What's particularly terrifying about the B-83 is its ability to be set to different yields, meaning it can be tailored to fit a wide range of strategic needs. It can be used to devastate a large urban center or take out a hardened military target with precision. However, once this bomb is deployed at its maximum yield, nothing stands a chance. In addition to its incredible power, the B-83 also has an enormous psychological impact. Think about it. Just the sight of a bomber carrying this weapon would send shockwaves through any enemy command. Its very presence would send a clear message: resistance is futile. And once deployed, it would not only obliterate cities, but also leave a lasting impact on the environment. The radioactive fallout would linger for years, making any region it touches uninhabitable. The B-83 represents the ultimate threat once it's dropped. It's over. It's scheduled for retirement in the coming years, but for now, the B-83 remains a potent tool in the Pentagon's arsenal, a reminder of the catastrophic power the U.S. still holds. The fact that a single bomb can hold so much power is a sobering thought. If the B-83 is still in play, then the world has to take a serious look at the kind of power nuclear weapons wield today. And, of course, if the B-83 is a symbol of destruction, what comes next takes things even further. Imagine a weapon so powerful that one launch could bring not just one, but multiple apocalypses. Enter the LGM-118, Peacekeeper, an intercontinental ballistic missile that doesn't just carry one warhead, but can deploy up to 10 independently targetable warheads, each with the capability of obliterating a different city. That's right, one missile, 10 cities erased, and the potential to completely reshape the geopolitical landscape in a matter of minutes. Developed during the Cold War, the Peacekeeper was designed with one purpose in mind: to ensure that if the United States were attacked, its retaliation would be so catastrophic that no enemy would dare strike first. It embodies the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD, meaning that if the U.S. were hit with a nuclear attack, the Peacekeeper would ensure the attackers would face an equally devastating, if not more extreme, response. Its design and power were meant to deter, not just defeat any enemy contemplating nuclear war. Each Peacekeeper missile carries up to 10 MIRVs, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. This means that when the missile reaches its target, the warheads split apart, each one heading toward a different target, at a speed that is practically impossible to intercept. The sheer scale of this weapon is mind-boggling. A single launch could wipe out multiple major cities, each one completely destroyed by a warhead with a yield of up to 300 kilotons. The Peacekeeper could take down Washington, London, Paris, or Beijing all in one go. Its range is also remarkable, over 0 kilometers, meaning it could strike anywhere in the world without needing to leave U.S. airspace. Imagine the strategic advantage of being able to launch such a missile from U.S. soil, striking distant targets with deadly precision. The missile travels at hypersonic speeds more than 20 times the speed of sound, making it nearly impossible for missile defense systems to catch or intercept. The Peacekeeper's ability to overwhelm defenses with a barrage of warheads has made it one of the most terrifying missiles in existence. While the Peacekeeper was retired in 2005, the technology still exists and could be reactivated if the U.S. felt the need to do so. The missile represents not just a tool of war, but a cold, calculated guarantee that no nation could ever survive an attack from the United States without facing total annihilation in return. It's a weapon designed to ensure that peace is maintained through fear, a stark reminder that the consequences of global nuclear conflict would be too great to comprehend. Now, imagine what comes after a weapon like this. A missile capable of erasing multiple cities, multiple nations. It's enough to make you rethink the entire concept of security, and if this is only number 2, you won't believe what's at the top of the list. And now, we arrive at the ultimate weapon in the U.S. nuclear arsenal. Something so terrifying that it could forever alter the planet's future. It's not just a bomb. It's a weapon that could reshape the world's coastlines, disrupt ecosystems, and leave entire regions uninhabitable for centuries. This is the Poseidon, a secretive project shrouded in mystery. But leaked reports and intelligence have suggested its existence, and the potential for destruction it holds is beyond imagination. What makes the Poseidon so unique is that it isn't just a bomb dropped from the sky or launched from a submarine. No, this is something entirely different. It's a nuclear torpedo designed to be deployed by an autonomous submarine drone. This drone can travel underwater for thousands of kilometers without detection, silently moving beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to strike. Once deployed, the Poseidon is set to unleash a thermonuclear explosion capable of generating a massive tsunami, one powerful enough to devastate entire coastlines. The sheer magnitude of destruction it would cause is so catastrophic that entire cities, regions, and even countries could be wiped out, not by the explosion itself, but by the tidal wave of radioactive water it would create. The Poseidon's thermonuclear payload could exceed 100 megatons, over 6,000 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. That's enough to send an unstoppable wave of water surging towards the shoreline, erasing everything in its path. The blast would send shockwaves through the ocean, and the fallout would poison vast swaths of land, making the affected areas uninhabitable for generations. It's not just the destruction of buildings and infrastructure, it's the irreversible damage to ecosystems, agriculture, and the very fabric of life along the coasts. What's even more terrifying is how undetectable the Poseidon is. Unlike a missile launched from a submarine or a bomber, this weapon moves silently beneath the waves. It doesn't announce its arrival with a roar of jet engines or the rumble of a missile launch. It's a ghost, lurking beneath the ocean until the moment of strike. There's no radar system, no warning, and no way to defend against it. By the time the Poseidon reaches its target, it's already too late. The weapon embodies the ultimate form of deterrence, something so catastrophic that it guarantees the enemy's complete destruction. The Poseidon is not about winning a war. It's about ensuring that there's no one left to fight. Its existence would forever change the concept of warfare, where the use of such a weapon would mean the end of everything. The implications of such a weapon are beyond comprehension. Imagine a single underwater drone causing devastation so vast that it changes the geography of the planet. Cities reduced to rubble by a tsunami, entire regions contaminated, and left behind in a radioactive wasteland. The Poseidon isn't just a weapon, it's a force of nature, a doomsday device that could forever alter the course of human history. And now, having heard about the Poseidon, you may find yourself questioning the real purpose of these weapons. Are they just tools for deterrence? Or is there a darker plan behind their existence? We'll dive deeper into that next. When you hear the term doomsday weapon, you probably imagine something from a science fiction movie. Something so powerful that it can wipe out humanity, reshape the planet, or even destroy entire ecosystems in a single strike. But these aren't just concepts. They are very real threats that exist in the arsenals of the world's most powerful nations. Weapons like the Poseidon, the Peacekeeper, and the B-83 are part of a frightening reality where the very nature of war has evolved into something much more dangerous. The concept behind doomsday weapons is rooted in the idea of mutually assured destruction, MAD. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union built up massive nuclear arsenals, not necessarily to fight a war, but to ensure that neither side could ever attack the other without facing total annihilation in return. It was a paradox of deterrence, a situation where the only way to prevent war was to have the ability to destroy everything, a kind of twisted balance of terror where both sides kept their nuclear weapons ready, knowing that to use them would bring about the end of civilization. The question then arises, why would nations invest in weapons like these? The answer is a combination of fear, power, and control. The sheer scale of destruction that these weapons could unleash is unparalleled. A single well-placed missile could wipe out an entire city, and in some cases, like the Poseidon, an entire coast could be submerged, altering the geography of the planet forever. The rationale behind such weapons is that they serve as an ultimate deterrent. The threat of total destruction is enough to keep enemies from ever daring to start a nuclear war. But the deeper question remains, what happens when the balance of terror tips too far? While these weapons are technically meant to prevent war, they also come with a terrifying consequence. The existence of such devastating power makes the world more volatile. Every nation that holds them must walk a fine line, constantly weighing the risks of escalation. A single miscalculation, a single act of aggression could spiral into something that no one can control. The moment a doomsday weapon is used, it becomes an irreversible event, a countdown to the complete collapse of civilization. It's chilling to think that, in reality, humanity has developed tools that could destroy everything we've worked for. But more than that, the idea that we've normalized these weapons is even more disturbing. Do we really want to live in a world where the most powerful nations are armed to the teeth with tools of mass destruction? Is this the price we pay for security? What's even more unsettling is the innovation of these weapons. As technology advances, so does the potential for even more powerful, more devastating devices. The Poseidon is a glimpse into the future, a weapon so secretive, so hidden, that it represents the next generation of nuclear warfare. And if we're not careful, it could be just the beginning. The question remains, how far will we push the limits before it's too late? At this point, we've talked about the sheer destructive force of these weapons and how they could change the face of the planet in an instant. But what about the real human cost? It's easy to focus on the numbers, the kiloton, the blast radius, the speed of destruction. But when we start to think about the actual impact on human lives, the picture becomes far more disturbing. These aren't just numbers on a page or statistics in a report. These are real people who would suffer and ultimately perish from the use of such weapons. We often hear about the aftermath of nuclear bombings in history, like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombings of these two cities during World War II marked the first and only time nuclear weapons were used in combat, and the results were catastrophic. Over 100,000 people were killed instantly in Hiroshima, with tens of thousands more dying in the following months and years, due to radiation sickness, burns, and other horrific injuries. Survivors, known as hibakusha, lived with the scars both physical and psychological of those attacks for the rest of their lives. But Hiroshima and Nagasaki were just the beginning. The modern nuclear arsenal, with its far more advanced and powerful weapon, would have an even greater impact. Imagine a single bomb, like the B-83 or the Peacekeeper missile, being used in a modern city. It wouldn't just kill hundreds of thousands of people, it would obliterate entire neighborhoods, incinerating everything in its path. The fallout would poison the environment, making entire areas uninhabitable for decades, even centuries. It's not just about destruction in the immediate moment, it's about the long-term suffering that would follow. The survivors of a nuclear attack would face a world that's been completely upended. Radiation would make the air, the water, and the soil toxic. Agriculture would collapse, and food would become scarce. The healthcare system would be overwhelmed, and the infrastructure of society would crumble. What happens to a population when the basic fabric of civilization is ripped apart? The result would be a new world. A world that might not even be able to support life as we know it. The societal collapse that would follow a nuclear attack could be even more destructive than the blast itself. And what about the future generations? The effects of radiation can last for decades, even centuries, affecting the DNA of those exposed and leading to birth defects, cancers, and other chronic health issues. The environmental damage could also lead to a nuclear winter, where the planet's climate is altered and sunlight is blocked by the ash and debris from the explosion. The long-term impact on agriculture and the environment could lead to food shortages on a global scale, causing starvation and societal collapse. The real human cost of nuclear weapons is something that's hard to comprehend, and yet, it's an essential part of the conversation. It's not just about cities being destroyed in a flash. It's about the lives that would be torn apart, the families that would be shattered, and the generations that would bear the scars for years to come. The true cost of these weapons is measured in the suffering of human beings, and that's something we can never forget when we talk about the power they hold. At this point, we've delved into the terrifying capabilities of these weapons, and we've seen how their sheer power can change the world in an instant. But what's the reasoning behind keeping such weapons in the first place? Why would any nation hold on to these doomsday devices, knowing that they could wipe out millions or even billions of people? The answer lies in a cold, calculated concept that has shaped much of the modern nuclear world: mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The theory behind MAD is simple, though chilling. If two nuclear-armed nations know that they both have the power to destroy each other in a matter of minutes, neither side would ever initiate a nuclear attack. In theory, the knowledge that a nuclear strike would lead to complete destruction on both sides is supposed to prevent any one nation from using its nuclear weapon. The idea is that the consequences of such an action are so catastrophic that no rational actor would risk it. This was the cornerstone of U.S. Soviet relations during the Cold War. Both nations built massive nuclear arsenals, not to win a war, but to guarantee that any nuclear attack would lead to their own destruction as well. It was a delicate balancing act, a tense standoff that lasted for decades, where both sides had enough weapons to annihilate the other, but neither wanted to trigger the apocalypse. This doctrine of deterrence was supposed to maintain stability, but at what cost? While MAD has arguably prevented nuclear wars between superpowers since its inception, the risks associated with this doctrine are enormous. The very nature of MAD hinges on the assumption that all players involved are rational. But what happens if that assumption breaks down? What if a rogue leader, an accidental launch, or an unpredictable event triggers a nuclear exchange? The balance of terror that MAD is based on might not be as stable as we hope. And let's not forget the psychological toll that living with the constant threat of nuclear war has on societies. The knowledge that one small mistake or one irrational decision could lead to the destruction of humanity is a burden that weighs heavily on both political leaders and the general population. The mere existence of these weapons and the doctrine that surrounds them creates an atmosphere of fear and paranoia. While MAD may have kept superpowers from directly clashing, it has also created a world where the threat of complete annihilation is always present, just beneath the surface. Despite its roots in deterrence, MAD has a dark side. It relies on the fear of total destruction to maintain peace, but it doesn't solve the underlying problems that could push a nation toward war. In fact, it sometimes encourages escalation, as nations build bigger and more powerful arsenals to ensure that their deterrent remains credible. Every time a nation upgrades its nuclear capabilities, the threat of an all-out nuclear war becomes more real. The idea that we live in a world where the only thing keeping us safe from global destruction is the fear of mutual annihilation is unsettling, to say the least. It's a system that operates on the edge of a knife. One wrong move, one wrong decision, and everything could come crashing down. MAD may have kept the peace between the world's superpowers for decades, but it's also left the world living in a fragile state, teetering between stability and disaster. We've discussed the destructive potential of nuclear weapons and how the doctrine of mutually assured destruction (MAD) keeps global powers in a delicate balance. But what happens when that balance falters? What happens when a nation pushes a button that can't be unpushed? Or when tensions boil over into an irreversible conflict? The answer is terrifyingly simple: escalation. The kind of escalation that turns a regional conflict into a global disaster, dragging the world into the abyss of nuclear war. At first, a nuclear strike might seem like a last resort option, an isolated event with clear goals. But history has shown us that nothing in war is ever that straightforward. Once the first nuclear weapon is used, the rules of engagement change forever. It becomes less about military objectives and more about survival. Once one side crosses the threshold, there is no clear line to stop the escalation. The nuclear genie is out of the bottle, and there's no putting it back. The moment the first bomb falls, it becomes a race against time to see who can retaliate and who can do so with more power. We've seen this in theory with the concept of escalation dominance, a dangerous strategy where one side seeks to overwhelm the enemy with an escalating sequence of more powerful and devastating attacks. This might sound like something out of a bad action movie, but in the world of nuclear warfare, it's very real. The idea is that once one side uses a nuclear weapon, the other side must respond with an even greater weapon in order to retain credibility. It's a vicious cycle of escalation, where each new weapon or attack pushes both sides closer to global destruction. One nuclear strike is never enough to win a war. Once nuclear weapons are deployed, the temptation to use them again becomes almost impossible to resist, because the stakes are now higher than ever. A retaliatory strike might lead to another and then another, until the entire system of deterrence has collapsed, and all that's left is the horrifying aftermath. The weapons don't stop once the first explosion happens. The cycle of retaliation could trigger an avalanche of destruction, one so big that the very planet itself might be irrevocably scarred. And don't forget the terrifying concept of counterforce targeting. When a nation targets not just cities and civilians, but enemy nuclear capabilities, it's sending a message: we will destroy you, your weapons, and your military infrastructure. But that doesn't necessarily guarantee victory. It guarantees more destruction, more suffering. As nations target each other's military facilities, nuclear retaliation becomes inevitable, and the war shifts from strategic to purely apocalyptic. The entire globe becomes a battlefield where survival is no longer possible, just an illusion. This is where the real danger lies: the inability to de-escalate once the nuclear chain has been set in motion. What begins as a localized conflict, a political misstep, or a breakdown in communication could turn into a nightmare of escalating attacks, pushing the world ever closer to the edge of nuclear annihilation. Every moment, every decision becomes a life and death gamble, with no certainty that humanity will survive the fallout. When you add to this the complexities of modern warfare, cyber attacks, misinformation, and artificial intelligence, the situation becomes even more volatile. The possibility of unintended escalation becomes more likely, with human error or miscalculation pushing the world ever closer to the brink. In today's world, an accidental missile launch or a false alarm could set off a chain of events that no one can control. The stakes are higher than ever, and the risks of triggering an unstoppable escalation are ever present. The terrifying truth is that once nuclear weapons are used, there is no going back. The world enters into an irreversible cycle of violence, with each side trying to outdo the other in an escalating spiral of destruction. The consequences are beyond imagination. Once that button is pressed, it's not just cities that are wiped off the map. It's humanity itself that could vanish in the blink of an eye. The horrifying reality is that once the escalation begins, the destruction might become unstoppable. As we continue down this dark path of nuclear destruction, it's important to look back at history to understand how we got here and why these weapons exist in the first place. The Cold War, that tense and turbulent period between the United States and the Soviet Union, is a key chapter in the nuclear story. The nuclear arms race that defined much of the 20th century was rooted in fear and mutual distrust. But while the world came close to the brink of destruction many times, it's a miracle that we survived it. The Cold War was characterized by a deadly standoff between two superpowers, each armed with enough nuclear firepower to destroy the other, and then some. For nearly half a century, the world held its breath, knowing that at any given moment, the wrong move or misstep could lead to the kind of nuclear escalation we're still terrified of today. One of the most critical moments came during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The Soviet Union secretly placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. The United States discovered this, and tensions skyrocketed. For 13 days, the world teetered on the edge of nuclear war. As both sides stood poised, each with their fingers on the proverbial button, had either side launched a strike, it's likely that the ensuing retaliation would have triggered a full-scale nuclear conflict with devastating consequences. But somehow, both sides managed to back down. Diplomacy, cooler heads, and sheer luck prevented the worst from happening. In many ways, the Cold War was a test of human endurance, a world where the stakes were as high as they could possibly get. Both the U.S. and the Soviet Union understood that a nuclear war could only be won by mutual destruction. That's why they kept building and stockpiling weapons. It was never about winning. It was about ensuring that the other side couldn't win either. And while the immediate threat of nuclear conflict has receded, the lessons of the Cold War still resonate today. The arms race didn't stop with the Soviet Union's collapse in the 1992nd. It simply shifted. Today, other nations, North Korea, China, and others have developed nuclear arsenals of their own. And while the concept of mad mutually assured destruction helped keep things relatively stable during the Cold War, the landscape has changed. Now, it's not just two superpowers facing off. It's a multipolar world where the dynamics of power and fear are much more complex. The Cold War taught us some hard truths: that nuclear weapons are not tools of victory, but of deterrence, and that even the smallest miscalculation could lead to disaster. It also showed us the fine line that separates peace from total annihilation. But despite the lessons of history, the world continues to flirt with the same dangers. We haven't learned enough from the near misses of the past, and the weapons we've created have only become more deadly. We might have dodged the bullet in the Cold War, but that doesn't mean we're out of danger. The world today is as fragile as it was back then, if not more so. The technology has evolved, and while the rhetoric around nuclear war might sound less ominous today, the threat remains as real as ever. And what's even scarier is that, in many ways, the fear and paranoia that fueled the Cold War are still very much alive in the 21st century. In the end, the Cold War was a warning, a reminder of how close we came to destroying ourselves. The fact that we've survived so far doesn't mean we're out of the woods. The nuclear weapons we've built and the doctrines we've created still cast a shadow over us, reminding us that humanity is just one bad decision away from total destruction. As we've seen, nuclear weapons are a terrifying relic of a dangerous past. But as history moves forward, so does technology. And so too does the potential for nuclear weapons to become even more powerful and even more terrifying. The future of nuclear arms is both an uncertain and unsettling prospect. While we've managed to avoid full-scale nuclear warfare so far, the ongoing development of new nuclear technology and missile defense systems continues to push the limits of what these weapons are capable of. And it's not just the United States that's driving this change. Countries across the world are investing in newer, faster, and more deadly capability, each one more capable of delivering death on a mass scale. One of the more disturbing trends we're seeing in modern nuclear weaponry is the development of smaller, more tactical nuclear bombs. While the world spent decades focused on preventing large-scale, strategic nuclear attacks, the shift towards tactical nuclear weapons designed for battlefield use rather than city-wide destruction changes the equation entirely. The B-61 Mod 12, which we discussed earlier, is just one example of this shift. Tactical nukes are designed to be more precise and smaller in yield, meaning they could theoretically be used in conflict without immediately triggering a full-scale nuclear war. But here's the catch. Once the use of a nuclear weapon becomes acceptable for even small-scale conflicts, the danger of escalation becomes far more real. Once that door is open, it's hard to close again. While smaller nuclear weapons are one side of the innovation coin, the other is missile defense. New technologies are being developed to counter nuclear missile threats, but the problem is that missile defense systems are, at best, only partially effective. The sheer speed at which modern missiles travel and their ability to maneuver make interception incredibly difficult. This means that while nations are building more advanced systems to protect themselves, the likelihood of a missile getting through is still high, especially if multiple warheads are involved. In addition to these new technological developments, there's also the growing challenge of nuclear proliferation. In an age where countries like North Korea are developing nuclear capabilities and others like Iran are pursuing them, The question becomes, how can the world keep these weapons under control? While international agreements like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT) exist to limit the spread of nuclear arms, enforcement is a major issue. The world is no longer just concerned with two superpowers now. Multiple countries with varied political interests are in the nuclear arms race, and keeping them in check is a far more complicated task than it was in the Cold War. The big question moving forward is, can we continue to maintain the balance that has kept nuclear war at bay for so long, or will technology eventually outpace our ability to control it? We've seen technological innovations over the past few decades that make it easier to build weapons with greater power and precision. But these innovations come with a heavy price. More advanced weapons systems, greater precision, and the ability to launch devastating attacks from further away all make the world less stable. And while arms control and diplomacy continue to play a role in reducing the number of nuclear weapons, the global landscape is rapidly changing. And let's not forget the role that artificial intelligence, AI, and automation might play in future nuclear warfare. The development of autonomous weapons, missiles, and drones that can make their own decisions introduces a whole new level of risk. AI could theoretically be used to optimize targeting, increase missile accuracy, and enhance the overall effectiveness of nuclear weapons. But it could also lead to situations where AI makes a decision to launch an attack based on faulty information, escalating the situation before human intervention is even possible. The future of nuclear arms, like the weapons themselves, is clouded with uncertainty. As technology advances, so do the dangers we face. While efforts to control the spread of these weapons and reduce stockpiles are ongoing, the reality is that nuclear weapons are here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. The question is no longer whether we can stop them. It's whether we can manage them and keep ourselves from going too far. Now that we've explored the sheer power of nuclear weapons, their terrifying capabilities, and the innovations shaping their future, it's time to ask the most pressing question of all: could these weapons really be used? It's easy to think of them as distant threats, hypothetical nightmares, but the reality is much darker and more complicated. Despite the decades of treaties, diplomatic efforts, and defensive measures, these weapons are still sitting in silos, on bombers, and in submarines just waiting for the wrong trigger to be pulled. The truth is, while these weapons are designed as a deterrent, they remain a very real and present danger. Their existence is a double-edged sword. While they help prevent large-scale wars between nuclear powers by maintaining a fragile peace, they also create a terrifying risk that one miscalculation could trigger the unthinkable. The sad reality is that we live in a world where, despite all the advancements in diplomacy and technology, a nuclear attack is not only possible, but the risk of escalation remains constant. Every day, the possibility of a conflict turning into a nuclear disaster lurks just beneath the surface, fueled by political tension, military posture, and sometimes sheer human error. When we look at the history of nuclear weapons, it's clear that we've come dangerously close to catastrophe on more than one occasion. The Cuban Missile Crisis was only one example of how close the world has come to nuclear annihilation. And yet, despite the horrifying close calls, we've somehow managed to avoid full-scale nuclear war. But as the number of nuclear-armed nations increases, and as new technologies develop, the odds of a nuclear conflict are not decreasing. The advancements in precision weapons and stealth technologies mean that an attack, once unimaginable, could now happen faster and with more devastating consequences than ever before. The question isn't whether nuclear weapons are useful as deterrents, they clearly are, but whether we can truly rely on them to maintain global peace. When two nuclear powers are locked in a standoff, the risks of an accidental or intentional launch grow by the day, whether it's through miscommunication, miscalculation, or political missteps. We're gambling with humanity's future each time a nuclear weapon is pointed in anger. And as the world becomes more interconnected and tensions grow, the chances of one of these bombs being used become more likely. What's even more chilling is the fact that we've never actually seen the full scale of what a nuclear war would look like. The closest we came was the Cold War, where the threat of all-out nuclear war was ever present. But in the modern world, with the addition of new players and the continuous development of new weapons, the stakes are higher than ever before. What happens when a rogue state with nuclear capabilities acts on their own aggressive agenda? What if a cyber attack triggers a false alarm or causes a military miscalculation? These aren't hypothetical questions, they are real scenarios that we could face at any time. Nuclear war, as horrific as it sounds, is no longer just a scenario we've created in our minds. It's an eventuality that could come to pass if tensions continue to escalate, and even as nations strive to control these weapons, there is always the underlying question, is it possible to keep such devastating power out of the wrong hands? Can we prevent these weapons from being used, or have we already passed the point of no return? The nuclear clock has never stopped ticking, and with each passing day, we get closer to a world where one bad decision, one misplaced trigger, could bring about the end of everything. While mad, mutually assured destruction has kept the peace for decades, it is a fragile and terrifying strategy, one that relies on hope, fear, and the assumption that everyone involved will remain rational. But history has shown us time and time again that when it comes to nuclear weapons, things don't always go according to plan. The real question we must ask ourselves is this: can humanity survive the ultimate gamble we've created? Or will the existence of these weapons eventually be our undoing? Only time will tell.